Jenna.
Down there.
You live on YouTube?
I remember little big
Good evening. The meeting of the Board of Adjustment, the Borough of Somerville, for December 6, 2023, will please come to order. Adequate notice of this meeting, as required by the Open Public Meeting Act, has been provided. On a copy of this notice specifying the date, time, and location was posted on the bulletin board outside Borough Hall, mailed, faxed, or emailed to the Courier News, and given to the Clerk Administrator. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and the decorum appropriate to judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Roll call. Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Would like a motion to move to excuse the absence of those not present?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Please stand for the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
All right.
Aye. All right, we have three resolutions to memorialize tonight. We'll start with Resolution 2022-02-0Z, 200 East Main Street, LLC.
Mr. Chairman, this was the resolution for to demolish to demolish structures and to create a 12-unit apartment building on the property with a surface parking area. As I said, by way of explanation, there were some delays in terms of logistics in terms of this resolution, though the applicant has not been particularly concerned about it. I wanted to make sure that everything was taken care of. The board granted a lot of relief in connection with this, and it included a use variance, an FAR variance, numerous bulk and non-use variances. So, and a great many, several waivers. I prepared it's a lengthy resolution. I believe that it properly represents what the board undertook on the evening in question, and I would commend it to the board for adoption. Are there any questions?
Yeah, Phil, I'm just, not a question so much as a concern. I understand things are complex, but it took a long time to get this thing up here, and I'm not sure why.
Well, one of the reasons was that there was somewhat of a, I guess the best way to say this is that there was as you know, there was a transition in terms of our changes in board secretaries. I did not get everything that I needed. When I did get it, I mean, it was a little later in the game, so I prepared everything accordingly, and we did have a period for a little while this year where, you know, we were a little bit, quite candidly, we were, you know, catching up a little bit because of the changeover. This was not, again, as I said, you know, the applicant was aware of what was going on, and it wasn't a problem.
It appears that it affected the other, this is across the board then, because the next one has got a January 18th and December 6th. It just seems not reasonable to me.
Well, I understand that, but the problem is there were some issues in terms of the transition. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to cast aspersion on anything or anybody, but we wanted to do the job properly, so under the circumstances, in terms of, for example, the Arc Development Group, there was there was some confusion on that one with the applicant's attorney, and that's been resolved. So we got those done. That does happen sometimes in the course of preparation of resolutions.
I understand that, but I think if you're running into those problems in the interim time, we should be advised. Because when I saw that, I was like, this ain't right. I mean, if you're having problems in the office or you're having problems getting things completed,
Well, it wasn't a problem really in my office, if I may be so bold.
I'm not even saying that. I'm just saying if you're gonna be delayed for that length of time, we should know about it. Plain and simple, we should know about it. I think, as I understand it, you work for us, we don't work for you. And if there's gonna be a problem, we should know about it.
Oh, of course.
No, we didn't.
And I know, I understand that I work for you, of course I do. But, I also wanna make sure you understand it wasn't, negligence or, anything like that.
I'm not talking negligence, I'm not talking anything other than if there's gonna be a major delay, and these are major delays, we as a board should be advised so that we're not surprised when we see these dates come along. That's simple, it's just communication, simple communication. And
But I think maybe earlier in the year, I did mention that there were that we did have some issues in terms of the transition, which did cause, quite candidly, did cause some issues.
I understand that, I'm just saying, let us be aware of this stuff. You just can't operate in a vacuum, plain and simple. We have to know, because if I had been asked about this by an applicant, which can happen, I probably would have done the Irish thing and lost myself,
Well,
so
that's
just let us know.
very good.
Someone like to move resolution?
I'll move it.
Second? Roll call?
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes?
Mr. Vidinsky?
Yes.
Mr. Flores?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes. Okay, the second resolution, 2022-003Z, it's 15 4th Street.
As an Art Development Group, this was a resolution of denial, and as you will recall, this was essentially the applicant wanted to construct a two-family development in a highly dangerous flood zone. The board made it clear in the course of the presentation of the application that, that there were many risks involved in terms of the application. Ultimately determined that the applicant did not meet its burden of proof under the MLUL for a use variance or the variances there, any of the other variances they're under, and ended up denying this. Again, as I discussed with the previous one, actually a draft had gone out of this, but it had to be changed. There was some confusion on this in connection with another application. But and I apologize for that. That was from my office. But we've got that fixed, and so it's on the docket for tonight. Are there any questions in connection with the resolution?
Have a motion to move the resolution?
I'll move it.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes?
And Mr. Vidinsky?
The third resolution is 2023-006C, which is RWJ Barnabas. This is pretty straightforward. It was a resolution involving signage at RWJ Barnabas's facility and the erection of a couple of signs. The board considered the application and approved it with some minor conditions. It was pretty straightforward, and again, I commend the board. I've had the board has had an opportunity. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but in the alternative, I believe the board can approve this in the normal course.
Any questions? Need a motion to move it?
I'll move it.
Roll call?
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes?
Mr. Zavisky,
Yes.
Mr. Flores,
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Anything else resolution-wise? All right. Land use, 25-27 North Middle Street.
Hey, Ed,
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure exactly how that works, but the other night at the council meeting, everybody talking out there wasn't heard on television unless they were close to a mic.
So we have all the mics on tonight.
Okay.
I have a little button here. Really exciting. Good evening, Counselor.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Michael Salvaggi from Lavery Salvaggi, Abramitis and Cohen, on behalf of the applicant. This is the property, Lot 9, Block 127. We're here tonight looking for use variance, site plan approval, to take an underutilized piece of property that abuts along, excuse me, the Conrail, New Jersey Transit line, and convert the buildings, at least the main building, into 13 apartments. 8 would be 1 bedroom, and 5 would be 2. Use variance is needed because we are in the R2 single-family residential district. However, we believe that through our planner, Gary Dean, we can justify the special reasons that would support the relief being sought. However, before we get to Gary, we're going to start first with our civil engineer, Jeff Hauser, who's seated to the left of me. This is very weird, like looking at yourself when you're trying to talk. Anyway, I'll just try to block that out. Anyway.
Mr.
and-
Salvaggi, I just want to, as you can see, we're somewhat of a diminished group this evening, so I know you're really seeking D variance relief, so I want to make sure you're aware of that before you start.
I think we have, what, 7?
7.
That's 6. All right, very good.
Yeah.
7.
I was thinking that before Stuart came in, and I was like,
All
oh,
right,
wait,
well,
it was
very
only
good.
6, yeah, but
If you're
then.
comfortable with it, I just want to make sure I put you on notice.
Okay, thank you. And then when he concludes, Bill Byrne, our architect, and then we'll finish with Mr. Dean. So, Mr. Chairman, we'll get right into it. If Mr. Hauser could be sworn in, and we'll go through his qualifications and then go
Sure.
through his testimony.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, so help you God? Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Jeffrey Hauser, Housel.
Thank you very much. Your witness, Mr. Salvaggi.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Jeff, I don't think you've ever appeared in Somerville, correct?
I have not.
Okay. If you could run through your experience, education, and qualifications in the area of civil engineering.
Certainly. Earned my Bachelor of Engineering degree from Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken in 2003. I worked for several engineering firms before starting Hauser Engineering in 2009. I've been a practicing civil engineer. I'm licensed in the state of New Jersey, New York, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. I've appeared before numerous boards, planning boards, board of adjustments, in this capacity to testify.
You just named 3 boards you've appeared before?
Ringwood, West Milford, Saddlebrook.
Accept your witness, Counsel.
All right, thank you. Now, Jeff, your office oversaw the preparation of the engineering plans, did they not?
Yes.
Okay. And you also went through the completeness process and have had an opportunity to review the reports issued by Mr. Cole, correct?
Yes.
All right. Why don't we start perhaps first with kind of an orientation or an overview of what's on the property currently, and then we can kind of slide into what's proposed.
The properties consists of 32,638 square feet, or .749 acres. It is located between the New Jersey Transit line, which on our plan is denoted as Conrail, which the surveyor has to pick up as, and just west of North Middle Street. Currently includes 3 building structures. There's a the largest of which is a triangular-shaped building in the southeastern corner of the property. Along the northern property line, there is a two-story, or it's actually a one-story masonry frame structure that is has fronts along the street. And then beyond that, there's an L-shaped structure that again hugs the northern property line and wraps around to the entirety of the western property line in the back corner. In between the two buildings is the access driveway from the street, which opens up in the back to a parking area. The site currently has existing drainage features. There is an existing drainage system that consists of 3 inlet structures and a series of 8-inch diameter pipes. The property is served by public utilities, including electric, water, and gas. We are proposing several minor modifications to the site. Notably, we are restriping the parking lot. There is, observe on the plan, on the southern property line, our parking lot encroaches over the property line onto the railway line. We are moving our parking back so that it's centered, that it is located entirely within our property. We are proposing a refuse enclosure just south of the center part of the L building. We are proposing several landscape beds. Two that are going to be along the frontage in front of the buildings that will be primarily foundation plantings. And then there will also be another landscape area just to the west of the end of the triangular shaped building. Overall, we are proposing a total of 16 off-street parking spaces, 13 of which will be outdoors, depicted. 2 are between the L-shaped building and the northeastern building. There's another 2 spots that are parallel parking along the northern side of the triangular building. And then there's a bank of 9 parking spaces on the southern property line adjacent to the railway line. We're also including 3 indoor parking areas, which would be within the L-shaped building and garage bays that are currently there, for a total of 16. That is a variance, with 24 are technically required. Overall, the property is going to reduce the impervious coverage because of the creation of some of the landscape features. It's actually going from a coverage of 91.3% down to 88.8%. Should be noted also that is actually a variance because the existing maximum coverage is 40%, but we are reducing it. Propose several lighting improvements. We have 5 wall-mounted LED lights proposed, plus 1 pole-mounted. Right now, I think it was acknowledged in the professionals report, the board professionals report, that there is some bleed out of the lighting onto the sidewalk and onto the railway property. Adjustments can be made to help address that as necessary. There was also a comment I just want to touch on from the planner's report about the access driveway. It is approximately 40 feet wide right now. We're certainly willing to reduce that to as short as 24 feet and repair and restore the sidewalk and aprons appropriately. In addition, there was some concern about the drainage itself, that there is some sheet flow that goes from more or less the first half of the parking lot towards the street. We are willing to install a trench drain across there and tie it into the storm system. That's not an issue there at all. One other concern arose in the professionals report is with the refuse area, the enclosure. We did do a truck turning analysis on that, and it is we are able to navigate it, but actually what we were gonna be doing is turning it 90 degrees, so the front of the enclosure faces the street right there. And we're able to maneuver and basically get a garbage truck to do a 180-degree turn by coming up and turning in towards the ADA spot that's just behind the triangular-shaped building. It can then do a 180 and then essentially back up to that area as needed.
All right, perhaps what we should do is kind of, I know you've addressed some of this, but Mr. Cole had put forward a fairly detailed report dated November 26th. His substantive comments began on page 6, under performance standards. And Mr. Cole notes where we should be providing information or testimony, and perhaps running through that is the easiest way of doing this. So on his first one, when he talks about the applicant states the parking demand is 24 spaces, however, the office in the attached apartment considered a bedroom, and an additional bedroom increases the on-site parking requirements. You agree with that, or?
Any room that could be used as a bedroom can be considered a bedroom, so I don't disagree with that.
Okay.
That would change the calculation from the 24.4 to 25. And that would just be an additional, it still was a variance at 24, it's a variance at 25 as well.
Okay. Now, he also asked the applicant should provide testimony whether the asphalt will be removed from the adjoining property. This is on number 2 with the NJ Transit. What's the proposal in terms of handling that encroachment of the asphalt onto the NJ Transit property?
The proposal is to leave it as is. We're not opposed to removing it at all. It's just we know in past experience dealing with properties that are controlled by entities like this, it can be a challenge sometimes to, one, get a hold of them, nail them down, and work out all the legalities of doing work on property that we don't necessarily own. If it's a requirement of the board, we certainly would entertain removing it. It's just, it can be a challenge because we don't have control over it. And through that process, it could take months, it could take years. They may say no, in terms of liability and all of that. If we had control of that property, 100%, there would be a proposal to remove it, restore it to some type of landscaping, perhaps even some little landscape stone with some plantings, make it nice. But because we don't have control over it, I don't think we can certainly attest that we would 100% be able to remove it. So, common sense says that why would they object to removing it? There's nothing really going on there, but.
Now, but it is our proposal that we're not going to use that area that crosses over into New Jersey Transit's property, correct?
We're not gonna use it, and we don't need to use it, based on the geometries that are available entirely on our property.
Okay. So, we'll leave that to the board. The applicant should provide testimony regarding the elimination of the utility poles. What area are we talking about, and what's the response to that, Jeff?
Well, the L-shaped building in the back has its own separate feed. I think maybe there was some discussion in this report that perhaps we should consider removing the building and then we would not need power. That is not what we are proposing, so that building does need power. We prefer, as it's indicated on the plan, to have those utility poles removed.
Okay. Number 4, you talked about the driveway apron flare that we're going to reduce. Mr. Cole had also pointed out that we weren't proposing curbing around the entirety of the parking lot. Why aren't we, and what are we doing in lieu of that?
Really, the area, most of the parking and driveway abuts buildings. We are surrounded, I don't know the exact percentage, but with the exception of the driveway access which obviously we wouldn't curb, and the portion adjacent to the railway on the southern side, being that we did not want to disturb the pavement that's on the railway property, we did not propose curbing there. Also, curbing could alter drainage patterns, and the intent of this application was to maintain the existing drainage patterns and the existing drainage features.
The number 6, the on-site parking lot, 1 van accessible parking space. You know,
Yes, the property is very flat in general. We can certainly provide the information to demonstrate that between the ADA space and the access to the building, we'll have a 2% travel.
okay. And then the sidewalk portion of the driveway, minimum cross slope of 2%. We will certainly agree with that, correct?
Correct.
Number 8, we'll certainly also agree to correct or repair any damaged sidewalk.
Yes.
Okay. Number 9, you talked about the trash circulation, so we can move on to number 10, about the site plan should be revised to depict the area to be reconstructed. What area is Mr. Cole referring to?
It's not 100% clear to me, but through the construction process, we had that detail on there that, once we start putting some bollards in for the trash enclosure, if it becomes necessary to do some subtle regrading to accommodate the ADA access and the 2%, that would be necessary. Certainly, when we get down to the driveway apron and reducing the width of that, there's going to be some likely resurfacing that'll be necessary there. So assuming this moves forward, as this project becomes more focused, we can specify exactly which areas need to be resurfaced, and then also indicate all and any damaged surfaces will need to be resurfaced.
Okay. And that kind of dovetails into number 11 about the thickness of the pavement and everything else?
Yes, I'm not sure if the nature of that question was because there was a concern that the existing pavement was not thick enough or too thick. We certainly would provide the minimum required of 3 inches wherever we need to provide new pavement.
Okay. You've been to the property, correct?
Yes,
All right. Anybody using the property now?
as far as I know, no.
Okay. That answers number 13. So there are no tenants in there now?
I do not believe there are any tenants.
Okay. Number 14, the masonry enclosures and installing concrete-filled bollards every 4 feet.
We wouldn't have a problem converting what we proposed into a masonry structure as it deemed the preference of the board and/or the professionals. We have a little bit of leeway. We can't enlarge it too much because we do have to navigate the truck through there, but we do have a little wiggle room to make that work.
Okay. And then number 15, we're going to include detail about the handicap ramps. No objection to that.
No, between my plans that will be updated to show the 2% path and the architectural plans, they can show those features.
All right. EV ready, was there an EV ready space proposed?
No, there was not. However, we're not opposed to doing it. I understand, under most recent regulations, it may be required. There also may be a benefit to it where if you provide an EV space or make-ready space, you can get up to a 10% credit. Or you can get 1 extra space as credit for up to 10% of what you provide. So under, this is an existing parking lot. So in my experience, at least with, since these new regulations have come into play, for existing parking lots, it hasn't been necessary to put in an EV space because for new projects, the thought process was you're building a new parking lot, let's get it ready to put more EV spaces in because the ground's open and you're not paving. In this situation, for an existing parking lot, it requires opening up the parking lot, saw cutting, and laying conduit. In my experience recently, it hasn't been required, but we're not opposed to it. And it also has a benefit because if we can, of these 16 spaces we provided, if we make one of them EV, we can get credit for another parking spot. Doesn't
Okay.
produce an extra physical spot, but you get credit for it.
We'd still need a parking variance, though, correct?
It would
All
not
right.
eliminate the parking variance.
All right. With respect to landscaping, Mike has some comments there. The first, really, his first comment he's looking for us to respond to is about shade trees.
Yes, there's limited area on the property that you could provide full shade trees. I think in lieu of shade trees, we have the option to pay some fee. We did provide landscaping. We put up 20 shrubs total. We proposed in the 3 different landscape spots. But because those landscaping spots are fairly close proximity to the buildings themselves, some of the shade trees may not be the most appropriate.
And we've already said to the extent we can't provide the necessary landscaping, we would do a contribution. So, Mr. Cole, also, the following landscape note should be added to the plans. That's number 4, and it goes right on through A through J. Taking any issue with respect to the comments?
No issues there.
Okay. And then, with respect to the lighting, again, several comments. First one about the light temperature should be 4,000 Kelvin.
Yes, not a problem. We can propose LED fixtures that comply with that. Well, as I previously said, we'll make efforts to improve the lighting situation, to limit the bleed out. And the one interesting thing about this property is essentially it's surrounded by buildings. So the lighting that is necessary for our parking lot is shielded by the buildings. And where it's really exposed to the public, on the south side, it's the railway line, which is, there's nobody really over there. And then the driveway, which you do want relatively well lit anyway. So from a lighting perspective, there's certainly some adjustments we can make, but that also presents some challenges. It's kind of a narrow corridor. So in terms of comment number 6 about the uniformity ratio, it does vary quite a bit across the lot. I haven't come across a uniformity ratio ordinance in many towns. It's more unique in the spectrum of things. But we could, rather than only proposing 6 lights, we could provide some more lights with less intensity to even out the lighting across the parking lot if necessary. And that's something we can work out with the professionals.
Then moving on to his stormwater comments, which are a little more technical in nature. Any take issue with any of his recommendations or improvements?
No, as I mentioned before, there are 3 grates that are present on the property. I have not done an inspection of them since this comment came out, but it's about making them bicycle safe. If necessary, we'll certainly replace them with similar sized grates that would be bicycle safe. In terms of some of, it's a property that's in need of repair. So there are some broken pipes, there are some missing pipes. In terms of the comments about correcting or replacing, all and any of those comments in the letter I mentioned earlier, in terms of the runoff that's going towards the street. We can provide a trench drain there to prevent runoff from going onto the street and keeping it on our property. We would tie it into the existing system right there. There's a catch basin just to the north of our property along the sidewalk.
Okay. And I think at that point, the remaining comments deal with architecture and planning. So, Mr. Chairman, to the extent board members of the public may have questions, Mr. Hauser will be available.
Members of the boards have questions?
Yeah, I do. Is there any way to increase the on-site parking?
You've read your professional's report. There was a suggestion in there about removing portion of the building or a building in the entirety. That's the only way you could physically add more parking. Or perhaps make that L-shaped building more accessible to provide more garage space parking. But it's fairly, we were just limiting to the 3 garage bays and saying we weren't gonna navigate in there. So the addition of more garage bays on that building and or removing the portion of the building is the only way you could reduce it or increase the parking.
Yeah, I understand that. You're not a planner, you're an engineer, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I'll get that, I'll follow up with that later.
The other buildings, are they going to be used as residential housing also? Is that,
The 2 along the street are residential. The L-shaped in the back is not, that's just garage and storage space. That, I believe the intent is primarily it'll be accessory to the apartment units, allowing them to have some storage.
So that whole building is just gonna be storage?
That's my understanding.
So your proposal is just to restripe the lot, not to repave it?
Correct.
Kinda looks beat up.
I haven't seen it in a while. I did drive by there tonight in dark, so,
Morgan, that's why I asked the question of what the paving job, it wasn't clear
Yeah.
what the paving job was for the whole lot, a section of the lot, or what.
it may be possible to top coat it without significantly altering,
Yeah, cause I was there yesterday and it looks roughed up. Especially if you're gonna put that much money into this. What about snow removal?
That's another, it's a tough area, as I said before. Everything's kind of constrained in this corridor. Fortunately, I think that there are some striped areas in the back that could store some snow. And ultimately, I think at the end, you hire a snow plowing company, a lot of that snow will be pushed off right onto the railway easement. That's the reality of it.
And then, on Mid-Oss Street, the retaining wall, it looks like the property goes into the middle of that retaining wall, which is a rock wall.
Where exactly are you referring to?
Would be on the, south end of the property,
Down toward the railroad.
by the railroad.
The wall that comes from the railway to our property?
Correct. I think you own half of that,
That's what it looks like, yes.
so that looks a little beat up also. It's,
I'll be honest, my attention really wasn't focused on that. But if there's some type of structural issue or concern that it could become a danger to the public, I'm certain that our applicant would look at addressing it.
That might make you get involved with NJ Transit. See you in 10 years.
Yes.
We're lucky.
any environmental issues for the property?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I don't know if any phase 1 or phase 2 investigations have been done on this. That's not something I would have been involved with.
Counsel, are you aware of anything?
I did not handle the closing on this. I've only been brought in for the zoning work. The applicant, is here, though. We can certainly put him on.
Good.
Yeah.
And
Good. Anybody else? Any members of the audience have a question of the testimony given? Okay, if you want to give testimony, you have to come up to the mic,
Identify yourself, please.
state your name, spell your last name, and give your address, please.
Nancy Krieger, Krieger, 46 North Middle Street.
Mrs. Krieger, this is just questions of the testimony given. At the-
Some of it,
So if you have statements about the application, we're going to hold those off to the end. You'll be able to speak at the end about your feelings. So any questions that you have, anything he spoke about tonight, that's what you can question him about.
well, I'm concerned about the environmental part. I've lived on that street for 60-plus years.
Okay, he didn't say anything about the environment.
What?
He didn't give testimony about the environmental part.
No, he did,
We
asked
don't
that
know,
question.
but
They don't
I'm
know.
not disputing anything she's saying. We just don't
Yeah.
know.
He
yeah, I'm
didn't
not going to
testify.
answer that question.
So I'm not asking you the question then?
He didn't testify to that. So it's anything he
He
testified
said
to?
nothing done environmental, and I've got a problem with that. So are you telling me to wait till the end?
Oh, he's not giving testimony on that, so that's going to be hard to question him about that because he's not going to be able to answer you.
that's correct.
So is that question going to be available to be asked later?
We are going to ask that question.
Okey-dokey.
You're welcome.
Go ahead.
Good evening, sir.
How you doing?
Good. State your name, spell your last
Brian.
name.
Yeah. Harold Willard, 44 North Medore Street, Somerville, Jersey, 08876. Willard. I did hear some testimony in reference to parking. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. The parking spaces that you're allowing for the tenants there, you're gonna need more parking spaces than that? Because you said you have like 2-family apartments?
Yes.
Or apartments for like
Bedrooms. Yeah.
bedrooms?
Two
Yes.
bedrooms.
So it'll be more than just one person living in there, right?
Correct.
Okay. What I'm saying is that the parking spaces that they are allowed it there is not gonna work because they could park on the street. Visitors in the evening and the weekend and stuff like that. You cannot park on our block, Cameron or Northwest Shore Street, because it's all loaded because the homeowners park there.
Would you like to ask him if he can make more spots?
Excuse me?
You have to ask him if he can make more spots.
Response?
You have to ask him questions about.
I'm asking him the question.
Yep, ask him if he can make any more parking on the property.
Are you gonna be able to allow any more parking on the property than what you have allotted?
As I previously stated, the only way we can create more parking off-street would be through the use of one of the buildings or elimination of one of the buildings. I'm just one of the professionals here. There's another professional that probably give testimonies to the adequacy of the parking that we're providing, and how it stacks up against certain standards. So you'll probably hear a little bit more about parking.
Well, then why am I asking you the question now and I haven't heard all the facts? I mean, I don't understand that, really.
So basically, every time someone gives testimony, you can ask them questions about the testimony that they gave.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay? So once they're done giving all their testimony, then you can come up and tell us anything you want, within reason about.
I got a lot I'd like to tell you.
We'll be waiting to hear for you.
We'll hold our questions and then come back later.
Anybody else from the audience have any questions of the engineer?
All right, Bill?
Thank you.
Your
sworn before you.
engineer will remain, he'll.
Yeah, he's not going
Great,
anywhere.
all right, very good. Thank you. You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I did.
Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Sure, it's William Byrne, B-Y-R-N.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. Mr. Salvage, you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gibbons. Mr. Byrne, you were here recently, in fact, in Somerville, but perhaps just for the record, put your qualifications and experience as a architect in the state of New Jersey and just reaffirm the adequacy of your license.
So, as mentioned, I've been before this board, I think actually quite recently, and often enough. I'm a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey. My office is located in Chester, 10 Main Street.
Please try to speak into the microphone, it's very hard to hear you.
Sorry. Again, my license as a New Jersey architect is in good standing. I'm licensed in New York and Virginia as well. And I've appeared before, obviously, this board and several other boards in Morris County, Chester Borough, last evening, actually, Chester Township, Mendham. And I've been accepted as an expert in the field of architecture.
Be accepted with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill, you've been at the property and you've designed the architectural plans that were submitted, correct?
That is correct.
All right. And we're looking here to the right at the drawing that's on the easel. What is that?
So that drawing is sheet number 1 of our submission. All the drawings that we have tonight, with the exception of some photographs, have been submitted as part of our packet. That drawing reflects the exterior elevations of the building. The existing building that we're renovating into 12 apartments is mainly a one-floor building with a section of the building that extends up to 3 floors. Again, the building was, I'm certain, originally used as some type of mill or manufacturing type building, so pretty typical of the era of its construction, which is probably somewhere around the turn of the 19th century, the 1900s. You know, the building is in amazingly good repair for its age. I think it's been repurposed probably several times over its history, and most recently it appears to be or have been used as a variety of commercial tenants. It seems as if there maybe was a machine shop in there based on signage that still exists. There was, you know, quite a bit of it that was used as office space on both the main level and the lower level. And, you know, again, just a good mixed-use commercial building. What we're proposing to do on the exterior is essentially restore and renovate that exterior to be a little bit more upscale in its appearance and its finishes and its detailing. Trying to give some nod to the history of the building, but again, at the same time, really create some nice upgrades. The exterior, again, while it's in good shape, the roof's in good shape, there's really not a large sign of any structural issues, but the finishes are a bit tired. It's a vinyl-sided product. You know, the windows in many cases have been replaced nicely with black windows, but our proposal is to remove the siding and to replace the siding with a fiber cement, a hardy plank siding. We think that provides a much more appropriate finish detail. It's a nice maintenance-free product. It tends to age well over time. Again, we do a lot of work on historic properties in Chester and Mendham and Long Valley, and these are the products that those historic commissions have really found to hold up very well and capture that appearance for a longer period of time. We're also adding some touches to the exterior. We've got shown on the front elevation, which is the top of this exhibit. That's the exhibit that faces North Middle Avenue. We've got some roof details with some standing seam metal roofs and some gable trims. And again, just an attempt to respect the history and the architecture of the building and create some nice enhancements. The bottom elevation on this sheet reflects the side elevation that faces the drive aisle. And it's that location that the bulk of the entrances to the building, the apartment entrances, are going to be located. To the left of that sheet, we've got entrances that go into those apartments in what we're creating as a recessed area, so there's a bit of a covered entranceway for those residents. Again, another roof detail at that point. We've got some additional doors going into middle apartments, and then toward the back of the building, some additional doors again in a recess. And those access points are serviced by an existing ramp system in both cases that get up to the floor level. And again, that was, I'm sure, part of the commercial use of the building. So it's fortunate that we have barrier-free compliant ramps in those locations.
This too is a sheet that was part of our submission package?
That's correct. This is, again, not a revised sheet. This is the identical sheet to our submission. This sheet includes the elevation views, the outside views of the remaining two portions of the building. The top elevation is what we call the rear elevation, the one that would be the side facing away from North Midway Avenue. And again, primarily you would see in this case a one-story element, but the view shows the backside of that three-story element further in the distance. And in this case, we've got one entrance proposed to a single apartment on the backside. There's currently a loading dock door in that location. And it's a bit of a distortion because the building in this case is not square. So what you're seeing along the right side of the building is just a variety of windows that in actuality face the railroad tracks. So that side of the building remains similar to what it is now. We've got windows and such going on there and some enhancements.
Mr. Byrne, I just want to confirm, you're speaking very fast, I understand that, but I just want to confirm, these are identical to what you submitted to the board?
They are, in fact.
Okay, there's nothing marked up or any colorization or anything like that?
That is correct, yeah.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
Proceed.
And again, the renderings do depict the building in a pearl color, and I can't quite read it, but I think it was a hardy plank pearl color. We have specified the actual color of the siding material. It's pretty well represented in these drawings, although they do look like a black and white drawing, so
Yes.
makes sense. Sheet number 4 of our submission we'll go to next, just because I think it makes a little bit more sense in the explanation. Sheet number 4, again, as originally submitted, no changes proposed or reflected here, show the apartment units. It's 8 apartment units on the main level of the building. So again, I would say that this is the grade level of the building. However, there are 2 apartments that are accessible from North Midway Avenue. At that elevation, it's also grade level, although I would consider it to be essentially a lower level. So again, what we've got here is the existing building, and as I mentioned earlier, you can see that the building is a bit unusual in its configuration in the sense that it's not rectangular or square. The rear of the building, in this case it would be the left side wall, but the top of the page parallels the railroad tracks, so that's obviously why the building was constructed in such a way that it's not very regular. What we did is try to create a configuration where each of the apartments would have some visual interest, some character. It's actually quite a beautiful building inside. There's some really, I think, dramatic features. There's some timbering, and there's some things that we're going to obviously try to save. We've got nice high ceilings in many cases. But again, what we have here is a depiction of the apartments that we are proposing on this floor. What's interesting is that we do have 2 entrances and 2 stairways that are shown toward the North Midway Avenue side of the building, which provide access to the upper floors of the building in that multi-story portion of the building. And so again, those would be, very nice apartments just based on their size and scale and location and views are just dramatic. But again, they would have access to this lower level covered entranceway. We have a variety of size in apartments, from very, very large to obviously quite a bit smaller. We tried to configure it in such a way where we provided a bit of diversity in the apartment sizes. Again, we have 1 and 2 bedroom units proposed. We do go down at the back side of the building to somewhere in the neighborhood of 650 square feet, which I think is our smallest unit, and that is accessible from the back. And then they get larger as they step toward the front of the building. Our feeling was that was a bit purposeful. We could have tried to reorient this to try to balance out the units, but in many respects, we felt that this actually provided a little diversity in maybe the rentals that we might expect from this building. I think in all cases, we're going to create more of an upscale feel to the project, and I guess it was just our feeling that we had the ability, and I think it was actually appropriate to create some much larger units. Some of the units are well in excess of 1,200 square feet, which is a very large 2-bedroom unit. So it offsets some of the smaller one-bedroom units, in our opinion, and again, I just think it's a nice mix of hopefully residents and rental expectations for the project. This is sheet number 3 of our submission, and this reflects the ground level area that's accessible from North Midot Avenue. It is essentially currently used, or has most recently been used as what appears to be offices. It was clearly office space down there and some file rooms and things of that nature. It has access to the exterior at grade level, and we have it configured as 2 additional apartments, which, again, work out well. There's limited application to get windows and doors in. We only have the one side facing the street, but still, nice apartments. I don't think they're in any way less quality than what's on the upper levels. Sheet number 5 of our submission is actually the 2 apartments that I had mentioned that were contained within the 3-story portion of the building. A small portion of the building, again, extends up 3 stories. I'm certain at some point during its history as a mill, there was a reason that the building was constructed in such a way, and it's not an unusual condition. We work on projects in Dover and other areas where manufacturing was prevalent, and we've seen similar situations. So again, it's a nice feature, I think, in many ways, and it's something that we tried to celebrate here. These are going to be quite large and quite dramatic apartments. So that concludes the design for the larger of the buildings, the mill building. And so we have one other building that we had essentially looked to repurpose. This, again, was a building that was used as an office. It was a freestanding building, independent of any of the other structures on the site. It's also closer to North Midot Avenue. And again, the sheets that you see here in these depictions are identical to what's been submitted to the board. So this depiction reflects the floor plan, which is essentially, it's a one-floor home built upon a basement, and we've got the 4 elevations of the home proposed. Obviously, the narrower elevations would be the front and back, and the long sides are the 2 sides. It's not clear to us if this was originally built as a residence. It does, in some ways, replicate some of the residents that are on that street, so my guess would be it would have been built as a residence originally. So our goal here is to just essentially refinish. We're going to renovate the entire interior. We're going to strip it out. We're going to re-insulate, rewire it. We're basically going to reconstruct this in its current location. And we've made some enhancements to the exterior to try to, again, recapture the character of a residence, adding a covered front entranceway and some steps out to the street, which we think is a nice feature. We've got a back entrance proposed. So again, we think this is a very nice a nice enhancement to the project and a nice use for this building, and I think it also really enhances the residential streetscape and strengthens what we're trying to do with the mill building.
Were these submitted?
These photographs were actually not submitted, but we actually just produced these as part of when we had done our initial field work.
Well, they should be marked.
Yeah, well, he's setting the foundation. So, we'll identify, we want to identify the whole board as an exhibit or each one of the photographs as an exhibit?
If you're referring to the photographs individually, you probably should mark them as, I think you should probably mark them individually as applicants A1, at A2, et cetera.
So let's, where do you want to start? This one?
Yeah, that's fine. So again, these photographs were taken as part of our initial field work. Whenever we're hired, retained to do a project like this, especially of a historic nature, we try to do fairly thorough and fairly exhaustive, research on the existing structure, really try to understand what the structure, what it has to offer.
Just want to confirm that the photographs were taken under your authority, or they were taken by you, or?
They were actually taken by our associate. Alex and I did the field work with another associate, so yes, I was present when the photos were taken.
Very good, thank you.
So again, they were Primarily, I guess, used as an exhibit this evening to address one of Mr. Cole's comments in his report. But I think what the comment asked for was, you know, is it our intent to use, or how do we intend to use some of the existing features of the interior of the building in the apartments? And I think that these photos do represent, you know, a lot of the quality feature that I think maybe folks that hadn't been in there might have expected that this building really offered. And what you can see is just that it's a post and beam, it's a heavy timber, you know, structure. The structure is just an amazing quality. The feeling that you get in these spaces are just dramatic, and we think this is really to be celebrated with the design of the apartments, and I think we can really do a beautiful job for the residents. I think that, you know, this look is just very popular today with you know, styles, and I think it just offers that blend of contemporary and history that I think people are really you know, striving for. We actually, in many cases, in new construction and upscale homes and other, you know, types of projects, introduce, you know, timbering and materials like this as items within homes just because of the strong character that they represent. So we feel that these are just very nice features. Again, these are not taken at any specific point, but these were just some examples of what we had in our inventory of photos that we thought would be helpful to depict you know, some of the character of the building.
And just to confirm, there is nothing going on in these buildings. That was a question Mr. Cole had about tenants or anything like that.
When we had done our field work, it appeared that there was nobody actually occupying the buildings at that point. We were allowed in by the real estate agent, and it didn't appear that there was any activity there. That there was some things in the building that maybe were just left over from the prior owners, but no, it didn't appear so.
Now, Mr. Cole had issued some comments. To the extent maybe you haven't addressed some of those comments specifically, why don't we just kind of go through his report, on specifically page 12, 13.
Sure. So, item number 1 indicates some of the exterior building modifications that are being proposed, and I did touch on those. So I think that, you know, we've essentially covered that item number 1. Number 2, gooseneck lights are located over the 12 apartment doors. Again, that was done to enhance the appearance of the building, and I think that Mr. Cole's question was that he'd like those gooseneck lights and the pattern of light reflected on the lighting plan, and I'm certain that Mr. Hauser would have no problems with that request. Item number 3, it's Mr. Cole's understanding that the UCC code requires units on the ground floor to be designed as adaptable. So we've got, we concur with that, again, in situations, in this case, where we have a building of this size with over 6 units, I believe is the number. It's required that the grade level units, the main level units, or 95% of the main level square footage be considered adaptable. We've got these designed with ample size doorways and entrances, and we do believe that in each case we can comply with the adaptability requirements for these units.
And then number 4 on page 13, unit 10 is not accessible.
Correct. Unit number 10 is, again, the one that's is the smallest unit that we have, 650 square feet. It's accessible off of what was, I believe, previously a loading dock. So there is a bit of an elevation change to the parking area in that case. And so our proposal was to have a few steps that led up to that unit. When we had originally done the calculation on that, again, the requirement being that 95% of the floor space be adaptable, and our calculation determined that for the entire building, we would be okay to have that one unit not be adaptable. However, in further research, and I think to Mr. Cole's credit, it appeared that 95% calculation only applied to the main level of the building, so we weren't certain. So to be safe, I would say that we can adjust the plan to make that an adaptable unit if so required.
Okay. And then number 5 talks about revising the drawings to depict all the intake, exhaust vents, bathhood, you know. Any objections to doing that?
We have no issue with that at all.
Then number 6 about the accentuated panel should be for all 13 apartments.
Absolutely, no issues.
Site signage, any proposed?
There was no site signage proposed as far as we were concerned. Again, we would probably want to identify the building with an appropriate number or something that's obvious to, guests or anyone looking for the building, but weren't proposing any specific name for the development or community or anything. We didn't necessarily see a reason to do that.
Okay.
I mean, unless the board felt otherwise, but it wasn't our feeling that it was important.
And then fire suppression and sprinkler system.
Correct. The code would require with this number of units and the multiple floors that this building be sprinklered. There would be no realistic way around that. And of course, in that case, we would be complying with the NFPA 13 requirements as opposed to the 13D.
Okay, then on number 9, about the backup power.
Right. We can certainly provide backup generator power.
Okay. The size of the one-bedroom apartments, and Mr. Paul notes, or calls out 8, 9, and 10, the size of those. I know you kind of touched on it, but we didn't get into real specifics.
Right, and I'm not looking at the actual drawing. I know that the smallest being the rear unit, I think, number 10 was 650 square feet. They grow in size as the trapezoid sort of moves away. Again, maybe for the benefit, Alex could read the dimensions of those smaller units.
Unit number 8, 765 square feet. Unit number 9, 688 square feet. And unit number 10, 650 square feet.
Okay. So again, starting from the back of the building going forward, you can see that those units just get consecutively deeper, but it was our feeling that the size even of that smallest unit was still a very nice size one-bedroom apartment. The bedroom size, I believe, is 12 by 13. The living room was 16 by 16. It includes a washer dryer, as do all the units. So we didn't feel that in this case that we were really compromising the quality of the area to provide those units that were under 800. And again, I will say that we do this type of work quite often, and a 650 square foot one-bedroom apartment, we don't consider to be a small apartment. So again, if there's a specific requirement, I guess we could, see what we could do to reconfigure. But our feeling is, this design, this configuration makes sense.
Okay. Ceiling heights, use of the basement.
So the ceiling height throughout the first floor varies a bit, and there is some infrastructure that we have to work with, but I would anticipate, I mean, there's probably sections that are, 11 to 12 foot, but I think in reality, we'd probably try to finish the ceiling somewhere around the 9-foot point, just for convenience and to deal with the mechanical equipment that we'll have up in that, in those truss base, things of that nature.
Okay. And then, I think we talked about how you tried to incorporate some of the unique structures of the building. Number 12, about the hot box.
We can provide a location for that space, likely, and maybe carve out some space out of some of the larger units or one of the larger units.
Okay. And then the heat.
So the apartments are going to be heated by heat pumps, electric heat pumps, which have come so far in the world. I think if I mentioned a heat pump 15 years ago, people would have strangled me. But now they're very efficient. They work very, very well, and it's just not what it used to be. And so we've got locations within the units to include the air handler, and we've got the exterior units depicted on the elevations.
All right. Then number 14 on page 15, I think we just talked about the heat pumps. The materials used to deaden or attenuate sound from the adjoining frames.
I suppose there might be a way to try to attenuate the sound from the train. The building itself, that wall is masonry in the building, so I wouldn't be so concerned about, any inconvenience to any of the residents. Again, that wall's a 12-inch masonry wall. I think soundproofing is certainly, pretty significant there, and obviously the train is probably going to be far louder. But again, I think that, we can provide the sound data to make sure that we're in compliance with the code requirements, which we've been requested and provided on other projects, so we understand that.
All right, and will the basement, how will it be used? Will it be finished?
So the basement, essentially, the basement, actually, I believe the question had to do with the single unit building,
Yeah.
correct? Yeah, so the basement in the, in the single residence is currently not finished. It wasn't our intention to finish it. I think it's currently used for mechanical equipment, and it would stay the same. We're not proposing any living space down there.
All right, and then, the detached two-bedroom apartment and an office, that could be, considered a bedroom. So, dispute that, disagree.
Again, the ordinance may determine that to be a bedroom. We wouldn't necessarily by construction code determine it to be a bedroom. It didn't have an egress window. That particular building would not be sprinklered because it's a single family, so therefore it would need to have an egress window in each bedroom. So again, it's been our experience, and it's been requested by other boards, and I think it just makes sense. With so many folks working from home these days, and again, I'm sure everybody's seeing that more and more, just the percentage of people that work at home, we try to provide home office spaces for, units where we can. And I think that this is an example where we have some square footage, and the likely residents of this would benefit from having an office. It's possible that if that created a parking situation where it increased the requirements on parking, we could essentially take walls down and just open that office space to the remaining, open area. I mean, our feeling is to have some acoustic separation is a huge plus for the potential residents of this home, but if it is an inhibition to the parking, we could certainly look to remove that office from that design.
All right, and then, the applicant should provide testimony, this is 18, regarding the amenities, including how mail and packages will be dropped off.
So again, as noted, we do have washer and dryer in each of the units, which we feel really provides, again, a good quality of life, and our goal here is to have more of an upscale complex. Package drop-off, I would have to, again, I'm not that familiar with it. In this case, there would be, covered entrances in most cases and recessed entrances, and we don't feel like it's on a street, because it is tucked into the complex a bit. So the assumption would be that packages would be, dropped off as they would at any other residence, but I would, I really wouldn't know how to address that, to be honest. Not quite sure.
And then, the overhang or covering of the entrance of each apartment.
So I think in all cases, except the middle apartments in the, on this main level would have included a covering. In many cases, the covering of the entrances is just the fact that they're recessed into the building. But we could certainly look at a detail that would add a roof covering to those two doors that don't currently include a covering, and that is a nice idea. I mean, there's a small overhang, but it's quite a bit higher. So yeah, I think adding a nice roof detail at those two entrances would be a nice enhancement. Yeah.
I don't have anything further from this one.
Any members of the board have a question?
I'll get back to my first question. Is there any way to make more parking in there?
I really didn't study anything beyond the buildings that we were asked to focus on, so I would have to really defer that to Mr. Hauser, honestly.
Okay.
I mean, I was probably in that back building because I think the thought was that we would have some ability to create some garage space in there. Could it be expanded to more garage space? I suspect so, if that was a desire, and certainly to have garage parking for these residents, I think would be a huge plus. I think it is a huge plus, it's what's proposed, but if we could propose more, so much the better.
More is better.
So is my
Yeah.
feeling.
Mr. Green, I have a question. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay, good. All right, thanks. Listen, these plans are great, by the way. I've seen a few architectural plans, and they're very easy to read, so thank you.
There you go.
The question I have is, how does one determine how many units a structure can hold? Does the applicant come to you and ask, or how do they know how many units can fit in the structure?
So, in our estimation, what we try to do, I mean, to be honest, most applicants that we work for, most people that purchase a property such as this and want to develop it will say, we want as many units as possible, right? I mean, it makes sense, because if we could get 100 units here, it certainly makes a better investment. But I think what we try to do, and again, I can't necessarily speak for the site plan, because that's really not our hat, but we were asked to say what makes sense, and understanding that this is a situation, I think it's a very unique building, and our feeling is that, you know, you want to create a certain feeling to these apartments. And so, in our estimation, when we went through the layout, we looked at different iterations, and we came up with this number of units based on what we feel was comfortable and appropriate sized apartments, an appropriate use for the building. We've got access, we've got egress, we've got, you know, the ramps. We felt like this was a good number. So, again, it was basically our suggestion, our recommendation, that this number of units in this building made sense.
As well as the bedrooms?
As well as the bedroom counts, yeah. I think we probably could have increased the bedroom counts to some extent, because again, I think we have some large units. 1,300 square feet is a very large unit. You know, there's 4-bedroom homes we do that are that size. But we didn't feel that maybe having, you know, 3- and 4-bedroom apartments on this site maybe made the most sense, right? There's not, you know, play space, there's not other things that made sense to have so many bedrooms in these apartments. So our feeling was to just make more and more luxurious apartments, nicer size entertaining spaces, things of that nature, while keeping the unit mix the way we have it.
I got a question about the units 1 and 2 facing Mid-Off Street. What are the ceiling heights of those 2 units?
The ceilings on that lower level were about 9 feet, and those were finished. They were plaster, yeah.
Okay, and then, so there's, adjacent to them, is there a crawl space beneath the other units, or?
And no, it was mostly slab on grade, and I suspect because when it was used as a mill building, it wasn't really appropriate to build on a basement. So most of that is slab. It's not. So it's a very partial basement to the building.
And then the ceiling heights of the 2 smaller units, I guess 9 and 10?
Right, that whole section, the roof is about the same. I would have said right now there might be an 11 or 12-foot ceiling height in there, but we think we'll bring that down a little bit. We did add some skylights too to most of those interior units, because they're as they got deeper, they got quite far from windows. So our feeling was maybe toward those inner kitchens and things like that, we would put some roof windows and some skylights just in a couple of those spots. I'm not the biggest skylight fan, but I think in this case it does provide for a nice situation.
Anybody else?
So, did I hear you say that there will be a generator that will provide backup?
It wasn't initially our proposal to provide a generator, but I think as Mr. Cole suggested, that it would be something that we should do or should consider. I mean, in discussions with the applicant, yeah, he's agreeable to do that.
It would service both structures?
I suspect if we were to put a generator in for this structure, we would have a generator independent to this structure, or a series of generators, and then we would obviously put a smaller one for that single unit, yeah.
Okay. So, back to Unit 10, it doesn't seem like there's a kitchen there.
So that kitchen extends along the left wall, if you look at the plan. So essentially, when you walk into the unit, it's a big open space, like a great room with just a straight wall of a kitchen.
So, okay. And then go to unit number 12. The 1 bedroom there, what were you saying before about an office and with windows? Or a bedroom with windows?
That's a single family.
Single family, right? But as I look at unit number 12, the 1 bedroom that you have on the 3rd floor does not have a window.
Would that be the bedroom in the bottom right?
Yeah, bottom right, 3rd floor.
Yeah.
Has it double closets?
Yeah, it appears you're correct. That would be a situation where we would want to add a window to that bedroom. I don't think a bedroom would work without a window. So yeah, we would look to add a window to that bedroom.
So is that by code or is that just by design?
So
It's by code.
I do believe there is a code that requires natural light, but in a case where a building is fully sprinklered, it's not required to have an egress window. And I think most people understand an egress window is a window that a fireman can get in or a person can escape in case of fire. But when a building's fully sprinklered, it's no longer a requirement, so we don't have to have operable windows with certain specifications. And again, those rooms are quite high, so.
Right.
But yeah, no, we would look to have a window in that room.
And then how about unit 12 on the 2nd floor? You have the living room, the dining room, the kitchen, and you just have a really, really small window that's next to the laboratory.
So again, that would be a situation where we have the ability, since all sides are essentially exterior, we would add some windows to that. I think that's a good point, yeah.
Okay, good.
We were, the front unit has just dramatic windows. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've noticed that. It's just absolutely unbelievable. So you're right, that was just really an oversight on our part.
So what about that building to the back, the L? Is it of the same, you were talking about the architectural quality of the main building. Does that exist in that building? Or is it more of a shed or garage-like areas?
I didn't spend much time in there because I think parts of it were not available to us, for us to get into. I don't know if the person that was selling the building had things in there that we couldn't get to. What we did see was very interesting, very nice. I would say it was probably maybe not necessarily contemporary with the mill building, but it was quite an old structure. So I think it had a lot of merit. It certainly looked like a very solid, sound structure. It wasn't in disrepair from a structural standpoint, at least for the portions that we had seen.
But they're not depicted in the plans anywhere in terms of what you're going to do with finishes or facades or anything like that?
Right, yeah, it was my understanding, we weren't really asked to look at those buildings as far as any type of restoration or any type of changes, so it wasn't our proposal to do that.
Essentially, you're looking at a 6,400 square foot shed for purposes of this application.
With a couple garage spaces.
Right.
Well put.
So the garage spaces, they're gonna have garage doors on it, I take it? Separate garages for tenants?
Again, with my limited time spent there, I would say yes. There appears to be,
There wouldn't be any parking in front of them?
No.
couldn't be, yeah.
Couldn't.
Anybody else? Mike, any question?
Well, it's not really the bill, maybe it is. Your utility poles, because you have, appears to be three-phase power, because it appears that there's a machine shop in the L-shaped building that we're talking about. So you have at least 2 poles or 3 poles going down that restricts the travel way.
Right.
And I keep asking the question, why are you bringing three-phase power to a shed? Why do you need the utility poles? Why do you need three-phase power to a building that is being used or proposed to be used as a shed?
The only thing I would imagine is if we were to try to maybe do some electric charging stations back there, to have the three-phase power might be advantageous, but if it's truly just a storage shed and a shed, then it's a good point that potentially maybe since it was its former use is no longer to be continued, maybe that
Right.
could be removed.
Because the trapezoid 12-unit building gets its power from the street.
Right.
Overhead the drop pole.
Right.
And I think the single family is the same way, so you have these utility lines going in that are in the travel way, so to speak, I mean, within a two-way travel lane that I don't know what the purpose is, other than maybe charging in the future. But typically, charging, at least from the state code, is single-phase 240, which would not require three-phase power.
Not require that degree of power.
Right.
Right.
Unless the regs say that, unless you're proposing a supercharger site.
Pretty unlikely.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, I think if that was a concern, it seems like that maybe could be removed.
I've been beaten on the shed a little bit, as you can tell.
I can see where you're going.
So you're gonna be using heat pumps. Is there gonna be any gas units for gas stoves or?
I think the decision was made that we would not do that.
Okay, so basically if you brought a generator, and that'd probably be your only gas appliance to the building?
That's a good point, yeah. We would service that with gas.
Anybody else? Anybody for the audience have any questions of the testimony that's given? Not yet. Don't worry, I'll give you your stage.
So happy I'm not a parking guy.
Come on up, sir. Come up to the mic, state your name, spell your last name, give your address.
Rob Bay at 43 North Meadow Street, B-A-Y-A-I-T. There were doors right on North Middle on the street level. Is that a single entrance to each apartment, or how is that?
That's correct. So there would be one door per apartment entrance, and there's 2 apartments, so there'd be 2 doors.
Okay. So those people would park around back and then walk around front?
Correct.
Supposedly?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience? Counselor?
Yeah. Can I just have 2 minutes to talk to my client?
Take a 5-minute recess.
Okay.
That's for you.
What's that?
To me too. Keep working on that.
Like, they're gonna leave it.
Oh, to turn it
My mic still is red, is that on or what?
So I can all mute them from here.
The only one that's not muted is this one, so you have to manually mute that.
Everybody's muted.
But when I, why,
resume the meeting. Okay, Counselor.
Turn it back on.
You're all on.
So, our final witness for this evening is Gary Dean. Gary will be testifying in his capacity as a professional planner. And Mr. Dean can be sworn, I know he's been before you numerous times, but we'll just go through just for the record.
Mr. Dean, do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Certainly, it's Gary Dean, D-E-A-N.
Mr. Dean, I know you've testified before this board. Your license still current?
A little more background. I'm a principal of Dolan and Dean Consulting Engineers. We are headquartered right here in Somerville at 181 West High Street. I'm a graduate of Lehigh University with a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering. I have a professional engineer's license in New Jersey that was granted in 1989 and a professional planner's license that was granted in 1990. Both licenses are current and remain in good standing. And as Mr. Selvaggi indicated, I've previously been qualified and appeared before this board as well as the planning board. And I routinely appear before planning and zoning boards throughout the state. At this point, I think I'm up to about 500 different jurisdictions.
Do you want to name them all?
Do we have that kind of time, Mr. Chairman?
We'll
I
come back
don't.
next week.
Thank you, Mr. Dean.
Mr. Cole told me I didn't, so.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. We accept.
Thank you.
Gary, let's get right into it. I mean, you know, the threshold issue here is that we do need a B1 variance. And, you know, you've looked at the project, you've been at the property. What's your opinion as to the justification for that type of thing?
Sure. And I do want to get into the planning testimony, but and I'm going to put on my traffic engineer's hat only because a lot of the discussion has focused on parking suitability. I don't think I've appeared before this board yet. I was here last month when we adjourned, but we have been studying the rehabilitation and reuse of the Granites building, very similar to this application, from a commercial, former mill, former industrial use, to be renovated for residential apartments. And as part of that, I'm going to introduce that testimony eventually at that application, but we've studied the parking characteristics of the warehouse building, which is immediately contiguous and on South Dowdy. From those studies, and we've looked at parking demands for residents in Somerville, recognizing the proximity to the train station, we're finding a need, a parking demand by residents who elect to move into these buildings of about 1.2 spaces per unit. And it works out to be one space, sometimes less, for one bedrooms where people just aren't using cars, and where we have 2-bedroom units, that's a little higher demand. As we look at this particular proposal, we have provided exactly that ratio of 1.2 spaces per unit. Now, with that, I've understood the board's concerns, and obviously that expressed by the public. I've consulted with the applicant, and we've reached, working with Mr. Byrne, the ability to provide additional parking spaces that would be garage spaces, if you will, in the, I'll call it the L-shaped building toward the north end of the property. And that ratio would bring us up to, and we would provide one parking space for each 1-bedroom unit, so that's 8, and 2 parking spaces for each 2-bedroom unit. That's 10 plus 8 is 18. So that would require 2 additional spaces within that garage building, and that gets us well above you know, again, what we're seeing in the borough. I was the traffic engineer for the station building, and that was built at 1 space per unit. That's a little tight. As we looked at, Michael, forgive me, the name of Percari, I believe, next to the Lips Lounge redevelopment, I believe that was approved at 1.2 spaces. Now, they're a little bit closer to the train station, but in this instance, if we can get that ratio higher with the proposal, we will satisfy the needs for the prospective residents of the building. So I'll offer that as my testimony to say, we understand there's a desire for more parking. Our visitors and guests, and again, these spaces would be assigned to the individual unit owners. If there happened to be a tenant that wanted no parking, then the leasing office could rearrange that and provide additional spaces through a waiting list. But we did want to acknowledge that concern and agree to provide additional parking. And with that, I'd like to then move into sort of my planning testimony. I visited the property in question. I've reviewed your zoning ordinance. I've reviewed your 2019 master plan. We are in the R2 zoning district, and the R2 zoning district permits, as permitted uses, single-family detached homes, community residences, and shelters. And I think that's an important land use designation, and at least it's acknowledged in your ordinance that there could be more than one family as a permitted use within a given, say, building. Another permitted use is a municipal building or a public safety building, which is a continuation, obviously, of an office use. The ordinance in the R2 zone also permits rooming and boarding houses. So once again, there's an acknowledgement that in this district, there could be more than one family akin to a multifamily arrangement. And lastly, houses of worship. Churches are conditionally permitted uses. As you've heard described, this is a former manufacturing mill building. Its history is unknown to me, but it obviously had a history of office and commercial uses. Those are not permitted by any stretch in the R2 zone. So I think one of the more compelling special reasons, which is what we need to do to advance a use variance, is to show that there is some enhancement to overall or general public welfare. And in my opinion, looking at this as a residential use and eliminating the industrial former use of the site is lessening that pre-existing nonconformity. And in my opinion, it's certainly compatible, more compatible with the surrounding uses, which are principally residential. I've done a little inventory. I won't bore you, but most of the surrounding uses on the subject site are single-family residential in nature. Immediately contiguous to the north is a church use that has a parsonage, so it looks like a house. However, to the west of our site is another industrial use that flanks the railroad property. As this type of use, rehabilitating the structure and using it, it does provide a continuing buffer to the predominantly single-family home residences, but in terms of land use and characteristics, having it be a residential use, I would say, is very close to what your ordinance permits as either resident shelters or rooming and boarding houses. It's not what we're proposing. These would be owner rentals for traditional apartments. In looking at your master plan, I note several conditions that I think are instructive as far as justifying the use variance. The first one is that as a general premise of your master plan, it is to encourage, sensitive infill development that is compatible with the surrounding area. That's right in the general, that's, I think, the second paragraph of your master plan. This isn't quite infill in that it's not a vacant property and we're not knocking the building down, but we're rehabilitating it for infill type redevelopment that, in my opinion as a planner, is certainly more compatible with the surrounding neighborhood than we all leave tonight, the board doesn't approve it, and it stays as a commercially used property. I also note that the master plan has a comprehensive development objective that acknowledges that the borough is a residential community and should remain committed to that purpose. So once again, with that as one of the fundamental focus points of your master plan, we are advancing that stated objective. As we get into, and I haven't even gone through the municipal land use law yet, but your master plan also acknowledges and strives to provide
opportunities for various housing options and a range of housing types to preserve residential areas. And again, we have a lot of neighbors who are here who are concerned about this. I believe that this proposal advances that purpose in your master plan. We're not in a designated area. I find that odd, Mr. Cole. Numbers 1 through 10 are your various sub-neighborhoods or areas. This particular one is adjacent to Area 11 in your master plan, but it's omitted. It's unusual as I looked at your area map, but because it is immediately contiguous to Area 11, there is an acknowledgement to, or objective to permit residential conversions of a principal building that do not increase floor area. This project does not propose to increase floor area. We're reusing the buildings that are there, and arguably, depending on how the garage spaces are treated, I would submit that we are not increasing floor area. So once again, we are meeting that objective. And finally, regarding infill development, as I've stated, there is a respect for the surrounding context of buildings that becomes paramount. And that's a fancy way of saying, try to blend in with the neighborhood. Try to be and respect the context of that residential neighborhood. So by eliminating this industrial, manufacturing, commercial use, I think we meet all of those objectives as expressed in your master plan. As we get into the municipal land use law, and I want to thank Mr. Cole because he provides both me as the planner, but the board, under his planning comments, the rationale and sort of reasons that need to be met to grant the requested relief. And the first is the special reasons. And in the municipal land use law, there are a number of stated objectives as to the purpose of zoning. And the first one, again, these special reasons, is to promote the general health, safety, and welfare of the general public. And in my opinion, having more residential uses in the predominantly residential neighborhood certainly meets that standard of proof for advancing a special reason. Other uses that follow that same objective is to promote the establishment, and this is subsection 5, to promote the establishment of appropriate population densities and concentrations that contribute to the well-being of persons, neighborhoods, communities, etc. Again, by putting a residential use in a residential zone, granted, it is multifamily, which is not permitted, but in my opinion, it is a superior land use alternative than continuing the current use. We get into subsection 7, which is to provide sufficient space and appropriate locations for a variety of, among other uses, residential needs. One that I often, and these are numbered, Michael, I think they're lettered in the municipal land use law, so I'm gonna go with the letters. My apologies to the board. The first one is letter A, that's to promote the general welfare. As we get into the transportation routes, that's subsection H, which is to discourage the location and design of transportation routes that add to traffic congestion and blight. As a commercial, industrial business use, it would generate more traffic and candidly would have a greater parking need than the proposal. This particular application reduces the parking required for the building, and it also reduces the traffic. We would have some people walk, we would have some people work from home, but we wouldn't have the constant flow of employees arriving and departing throughout the day. So I think that advances one of those stated purposes of zoning. Then we get into subsection I, which is to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design. I'm pleased that Mr. Byrne is here as the architect. I find his designs to be exceptional as a planner. I've seen them in other communities. They embody the highest quality of standards in terms of fit and finish. And I believe those are reflected on the renderings that you've seen. So in my opinion, the building that's there, which has quite frankly been somewhat neglected, will be certainly restored and refreshed to a very high standard, which will promote that purpose with a high aesthetic design. And lastly, as we get into preserving the character of a neighborhood and the conservation of neighborhood values, that too will be met through this project, again, with the conversion to a residential use. In terms of the negative criteria, I quite frankly am hard pressed to identify any of those. We are reducing the pre-existing nonconformity with regard to the use. We are reducing the pre-existing nonconformity with regard to parking. We are making the building more compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. And in general, I am hard pressed again to find any negative criteria associated with this application. So on balance, I think the positives outweigh the detriments substantially, and that the use can be granted notwithstanding the deviation from the zone plan, which does not expressly permit multifamily homes, but it permits things that are very close and I would argue adjacent to multifamily uses in the building. Given the location of the site, the alternative is obviously to knock it down, and that represents a hardship to the property owner. And I think from the photographs, there are a lot of very unique aspects to the building in terms of its age and its character that will be a benefit to the future residents. So with that, and again, the bulk variances run principally with the property. I think from the zoning chart, all of the requested relief in terms of the variances already pre-exist. For example, building coverage, the improvement coverage, the floor area ratio. Those are all pre-existing conditions that would continue to remain with the application.
There's actually, albeit, small but not insignificant reduction in the impervious coverage, which currently exceeds the standards in the R2.
Correct. My apologies. Yes, that would be reduced as well. So there's more greenscape, a nominal amount. I mean, it's 1,000 square feet or so, but every little bit helps, which improves drainage. The applicant has been responsive to Mr. Cole's concerns with regard to drainage. The driveway opening would be narrowed and be appropriate for a residential use. So with that, I don't believe I have anything else, Mr. Chairman, and certainly welcome any questions.
Members of the board?
Yep, I'm gonna ask the same question again. Can we make more parking, and is that garage parking necessary? If it were removed, how many spaces could we get, and can we
Sure.
cure that problem?
Because the buildings are already there, and again, we've looked at adding additional parking, so we would
I
bring
know the
that.
buildings are there. When I was a kid, it was an active mill. I don't know all about that building.
So we've proposed to add 2 additional spaces to get to the ratio I suggested, which is the 1 space for 1 bedroom, 2 spaces for 2 bedroom. I would also submit that meets the RSIS, the residential site improvement standards for parking for residents. What we don't meet is the required guest parking. And
That's exactly where I'm going with this. Now, I'm aware of the Granite's application. I know applications on Main Street, and I think you have to admit that if you're on Main Street, if your guest comes along and can't park, they go to a public parking lot, they either pay the meter or go there after 7.
Correct.
So it's a different, I don't believe that we have that same existing condition on North Meadow Street.
We don't, and half the street, the easterly side of the street allows on-street parking. As we get on the other side of the railroad tracks where the lighting, Genie, I think it is, store, there are 2 spaces on that side of the bridge that presumably free up as well. So we know that there is on-street parking, and that's what's being used by other residents as well. What it would mean is anyone who.
On-street parking doesn't.
I'm sorry.
Does on-street parking provide parking for everyone who lives there plus their guests. Now, big apartments like that, people are gonna come and visit, no doubt about it. With your formula, which I agree would be fine in the business zone, do you think it's really fine in a residential neighborhood that's an older, completely non-conforming neighborhood by today's standards? Parking is an issue, particularly at night.
And what it might mean is that anyone who's a guest to this building may have to park a little bit further away from the building.
Where would that be?
On continuing up to the north, that they may have to go a block away, on the street, Cayman Street, Command Street.
Is that good planning?
I think it's good planning in that it meets the
If you
needs
lived
of.
on that street, would you think it's good planning?
I'm sorry.
If you lived on those streets, would you think it's good planning?
I think in a higher density neighborhood such as this, and it's not Hoboken, right? Hoboken, that's a whole different animal for parking.
That's why we don't live there.
I think balancing the needs of the residents, I think we're oversupplying the parking, quite frankly, but we did want to be responsive to the board's concerns.
And I'll ask you the question again, and maybe you don't have the answer. If the, I'm gonna call it a shed, because it's called different things. When I was a kid, they parked pickup trucks in there. It's a shed. If that building was removed, how many square foot would that give you, and what kind of parking would you pick up?
Can I just have 1 minute to?
Sure.
To ask a question?
You could have an hour.
In discussing it with the applicant, rather than removing the building, because covered parking allows a few things. It allows, obviously, the resident to have a secure location under cover for their vehicle. Number two, it allows for the electric vehicle charging equipment to be installed in the building. And number three, it does provide a little extra storage space, whether it's a loft or something, because we don't have that, which is typical, an amenity in a newer building.
Can the electric vehicle charging stations, can they be outside in the fresh air, or do they have to be in a shed?
They can be in either location.
Yes, okay.
For example, many homes have them, it's a dryer outlet. It's a 240 volt,
Yeah.
1450 plug. Because the building already has electric in it and power, it's better to do that under cover than outside exposed to the elements.
In your experience, would it be possible to have that charging station outside in a regular parking lot as opposed to in a shed or undercover?
It can be done for both, yes.
Okay.
The preferred design is to put it in an enclosed environment where the power already is, rather than trenching and putting new equipment. That being said, we would propose to leave the shed building, but to provide the required number of parking spaces, and then the surface lot would be available for visitors and guests, so that we can comply with the, I think it's 24 required spaces. 25,
25.
thank you.
I'm not quite picturing how you're planning on doing that. Maybe somebody should draw that out and show us.
There are garage doors in that shed, and they're deep enough for a garage. We're taking the shed and we'll have roll-up doors and create a garage space, rather than taking the building down.
And how many cars will fit in that shed?
We can fit the 7 that were deficient. So we will comply and provide 25 parking spaces.
So the problem that we have is that we're not looking at that building. We don't have anything. I mean, I have pictures on my phone from yesterday, but I see there's a second floor there. What's on the second floor?
I'm the wrong person to
I
ask
know.
about that.
Well,
Can
somebody,
we get Bill up here?
Well, he may not have the answer because he already stated that he
He didn't
really
get into
wasn't
that
hired
building.
to look at that building, so that's unfair to ask of him.
I was in the building briefly. I do recall there being a partial second floor over that front portion of the building, and
Right.
maybe it was at some point used for some auxiliary offices, but it wasn't much of the building. As I recall, most of it was just a one-story. It looked like, again, I think it was mentioned that maybe pickup trucks were parked there.
Right.
It looked like a long shed. Maybe there was wood stored in there or something. And so again, the discussion was, there's a couple garage door bays, but there doesn't seem to be any reason why the length of the building and its access directly to the parking, we couldn't just revise that building to include individual garage bays for each of the residents.
it looks like a home run to do, but here's the issue. We don't know what the building is gonna look like. And I don't know if that is the owner that's sitting in the back row, but maybe it would be good to get the owner to come up and testify.
As to what the building would look like, or?
Well, yeah, see, you have that large, what is it, 6,000 square foot shed, as we're referring it to, and it's in as bad a condition as the main two buildings that we're discussing tonight. So are we gonna put hardy board on that? Are we gonna, is the roof intact? What do the garage doors look like? I think it's a fair question to ask.
I mean, I can call them, yeah, I don't know, because we didn't, look, you can tell, we never looked at this building for any use. So, besides the shed, but, you know, Manny, if you wanna come up.
I would finish up with your planning testimony first, and then.
Yeah, I would ask that you complete that, and then we'll have them.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
fine.
thank you.
Well, we're finished with the planning, I mean, except to the extent that we're gonna talk about this issue. Because obviously, you know, our position is now, we've got the required number of parking. I understand you guys wanna see what it looks like and how it plays out, so, but, I mean, Gary can certainly answer any additional.
Honestly, I like the project. I think it's great. I really think it's good for the neighborhood. But this was a tremendous oversight on this application to present to our board, for us to approve something and leave that building the way that it is. It's almost insulting.
Understood.
As long as we're commenting, I think what you're planning for the front, the old mill building is pretty nice. I mean, I think it really would enhance the neighborhood. But as Morgan says, the tail's wagging the dog right now.
Mr. McLaughlin, if I could, there already were 3 parking spaces proposed in that building.
Right.
We would just replicate that. I mean, in other words, we had 3, and now we're moving it up to whatever the number is,
Right.
10 more.
But Gary, the building, even with 10 more spaces, is grossly bigger than needed for 10 spaces. Any way you slice it, you don't need that size building for an extra 6 or 7 or 8 parking spaces.
Agreed.
Right? And the second floor, it appears to me to be an office because there's an air conditioner on the second floor.
At some point, the building doesn't have a lot of amenities, right? We look at what's here. There's no clubhouse, there's no fitness room, there's no work spaces. That's what that space certainly lends itself, if the applicant so chooses, which is why there's a little bit of a reluctance to say, let's knock down buildings, because they're there already. And as this evolves, maybe there are continuing creative uses that the tenants would like, that can be rehabilitated and fit into that space. So that's the only reason I'm saying the building's there. It's in, by all accounts, decent shape, and garages are, I think, an unheard amenity in the borough. I mean, there are few and far between, so if there's a way to allow that, I think this really sets this building apart from many others that you've considered over the years.
I can't speak for the board, but I think the project looks really good until we get to that parking issue. And the parking issue is an issue because we can't adversely affect that neighborhood. There's enough going on in that neighborhood now that we can't make their life more complicated. It's a very dense neighborhood. I grew up down there. I mean, it's been, when I grew up down there, people walked to work. That doesn't happen today. Nobody owned a car. You know, it was a different world. They walked to the mill to work.
They did have horses, though.
Well, I did, but anyway. But, you know,
So you've heard, the applicant will comply with the required parking, certainly want to be an asset to the community and the neighborhood, and we've received that message loud and clear.
So I do have a parking question.
Yes, sir.
Other than the others. Is parking included with the rent, or is that charged extra?
We'll defer, can I defer that
Absolutely.
question to, yeah.
I don't know if we thought that far ahead.
Because one of the problems we've had in some of our other units, they started charging for parking, and everybody fled to the street, flooded the street parking, and the homeowners are like, okay, what's going on
The
here?
argument is you charge extra, and then is the parking lot may not be used because it's an extra fee, therefore, are you really providing parking? I mean, you can have a big parking field, charge $300 more a month, and half the tenants say no, and they end up parking on the street. This is what the employees for the post office do. There's no parking in the post office, and where do they go?
We have
Wherever
other,
the no parking signs are, and
We
you
have
put them
other-
up, it's just pushing a pillow.
we have
You
other
still have the
residential
demand, right,
projects where
Gary?
that's happening,
The
yeah.
demand is there, the question is,
I understand completely.
Anybody else on the board have any questions for the planner?
Did you write a report about the warehouse parking study? Did you write a
Yes, I
report?
did, actually.
Okay.
Not for this application, and unfortunately, we were not able to hear that last month. But yes, I will be introducing that. I'm just sharing with you sort of the thumbnail sketch of that, but yes.
Okay. Started well on the parking. I just-
It's already been submitted.
Oh, okay. Anybody else? Any member of the audience have a question for the planner? Just state your name, spell your last, and give your
Hi,
address.
my name is Margaret Weinberger, Weinberger. I live at 42 North Midor Street, and my question is for Mr. Dean. Is that Mr. Dean?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you please read again the R2, the community use in the ordinance from the, could you please, I have two questions, that's one. It was the first thing you said about
Community residence or shelter.
community residence or shelter. And
That is a permitted use in the zone.
do you know what that means? Could you explain it in layman's terms for people like me?
I was remiss in not looking up the definition and whether it's in the land use ordinance. I think by common, it would be a facility to take care of people that may be homeless or are lacking permanent housing.
Okay.
So it is, I'll say, a facility that accommodates unrelated individuals in a multi-unit facility.
Facility, okay, that
Safe
makes
house.
sense. And my second question is, tell me what 2/10 of a car is.
Yeah, that gets rounded down to one, so, right.
Okay, great. And I would like to also let you know that across the street from that property, you said it's a residential area. 60% of the houses on the east side of the street are multifamily rentals. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Other questions for Mr. Dean? Oh,
Yes, I think I did.
My name is James Von Schilling, V-O-N-S-C-H-I-L-L-I-N-G, and I live at 42 North Midor Street. And I guess my question is, you refer to the use of the property for commercial, professional purposes and how we would be better off if it wasn't. And I'm wondering whether you actually looked into how it's been used. I've been living across the street from it for 40 years. And have you looked into like how many employees typically worked in there and what the traffic was like the way it is?
I look at it from a zoning perspective because that's what we're here to discuss. And while I'm sure the use of the building ebbed and flowed over time, and I don't have a 40-year institutional history of its use, I look at it from a zoning perspective and I say it's a 17,000 square foot building and it needs 4 parking spaces per 1,000, and that means that building, if we were to come before and propose it, we need 68 parking spaces. But we don't have 68 parking spaces. So whatever demand it generated was imposed on the neighborhood. And so we are contracting that demand significantly, and now, as you've heard, to contain it 100% on site. So I'm sure it had periods where it was grossly underutilized. I'm sure it had periods where it was very busy and very noisy, and trucks came in and out, and it was adjacent to the railroad for a reason. So we have to look at it in this process to contrast what is proposed with what its use and how it has been used.
I would just suggest it make more sense to contrast it with how it's actually used rather than the conjecture that there were all sorts of trucks coming in and out. But thank you anyhow.
You're welcome.
But, Dean, residential use is usually less than commercial uses, correct?
Correct.
So usually the intensity of the use drops when you go to residential.
I'm seeing this throughout the state where, since the pandemic, you're probably hearing about it, and I know this community was sensitive to a proposal to rehabilitate one of the office buildings on Route 22 in Bridgewater. And the office market has completely collapsed since the pandemic. So are these 150 and 300,000 square foot buildings that have no purpose, they're either being converted to residential use or knocked down entirely and rebuilt for residential or often case warehouse. Both instances, that is substantially decreasing the traffic intensity.
And also nationally, housing trends are going more towards residential, high-volume residential areas instead of single-family. As you know in town, as people catch us, they're like, what are you doing? You're approving another apartment building. We can't handle any more apartment buildings, but this is the kind of housing that people are looking for now. So are you seeing the same trends?
I'm seeing mixed-use developments. Now, Somerville in and of itself is a beautiful mixed-use, it's a downtown area, so you have a blend of retail and residential and commercial. The newer communities are doing just that, knocking down the middle. Just Monday night, Monmouth Mall in Eatontown, 1.5 million square feet.
Yep.
Half of it is being demolished for apartments, and it's creating a self-contained village, principally for walkability, and you can only get that with higher density.
Correct. Good time, sir. Just state your name and spell your last again.
Harold Willard, 44 North Medora Street, Somerville, New Jersey. My question is, with this diagram here, pardon my back. These entrances here on North Medora Street?
I believe that's the side of the building that faces the driveway that comes in from Midoff Street.
That's the north side of the building.
Thank you. So that's not what you would see on the street.
What building, what part of this building do you see on North Medora Street?
That
The top, I
it
believe.
looks like the top exhibit.
This top here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this entrance is like
To the right,
from the street to this big large building here?
correct.
Thank you for the
Oh,
clarification.
you're very welcome.
Any other questions for the planner?
Yeah,
What's your question?
about the street,
About parking?
Middle Street and parking. Like I said, want me to do it again? Nancy Krieger, Krieger, 46 North Middle Street. I've lived on that street for 60 years. I lived at 34 Middle Street when I was about 5, we moved there. And it was a feed mill, an animal feed mill with 4 or 5 silos in the back. And the pigeons and the rats and the dust that used to blow from there drove us all crazy. Now, that feed, I don't remember when the feed mill went down. We moved up to 46 Motor Street when my parents bought the house. My concern is 7 of those houses on Middle Street are absentee landlords. So they don't give a crap about what happens on the street. The parking is absolutely ridiculous because most of us don't have driveways. And most of us have 1 or 2 vehicles.
Ma'am, do you have a
Those-
question?
What?
Do you have a question?
I'm getting there.
Well, okay, that's the purpose of this portion
The
of the hearing.
parking on the street, and because it's a cutoff from 206 to go bypass the circle, comes down Middle Street, West End, Mountain. In the morning and in the evening, the rush hour traffic is crazy. So we have people that park on the wrong side of the street, nothing happens. We have people who park all over Helen Creation, nothing happens. And the speeding is out of control. Every time I see my neighbor's kids playing on their front yard, I wait because we got speeders. Now, my father was a cop in Somerville in the 60s.
I have a question.
Ma'am, you're testifying, you really have to ask a question.
Oh, I don't want it there. Why are you building it there?
The building's there.
The
So-
building is there, the building is old, the building is a piece of crap. And we don't want any more residents in that neighborhood. The street can't handle it. And if you're not gonna give 25 pieces of a parking lot,
We are.
you're gonna get, okay, so that's the people, where are the people gonna park when there's, snow plow removal, when they have friends come over?
Part of the required parking includes visitor and guest parking. So that accounts for the birthday parties and that accounts for the relative who visits. Our original proposal did not have that. We heard you loud and clear. And so there's been an accommodation to provide that parking on site. So your
25 parking spaces, you
correct.
said, right?
Your
12
neighborhood will
12
not be
apartments,
burdened.
2 parking spaces each.
It's 13 apartments, and we are required, because some are one bedrooms, they don't need two parking spaces.
Why not? You don't, what's a husband and wife?
Sure, that's the required parking in the ordinance. That's
Well,
what,
I'm not even gonna say anything about Somerville ordinances, because they changed zoning things without all this stuff.
Sure.
Because mine and Harold's were changed from professional to residential.
so,
We cannot handle these people on the street, the traffic, the parking,
So we've
but
heard,
nobody really gives a
well, we
crap.
do. And just so you know, when we do zoning changes, it is a public announcement. And when we do master
Well,
planning.
let me tell you, when Somerset Valley Bank came in, and they were zoned professional like everybody else on West End, because Harold and I are right on that corner, all of a sudden I find out that I'm not zoned professional anymore, which raises the price of my property, and I'm zoned residential. They changed it, I never knew about it.
It's made
So-
public announcements.
I'm sorry, and I don't mean to insult you people, politicians are liars.
Yeah, but we're not politicians, we're you.
How did you guys get your job?
They asked
We're volunteer.
volunteers.
This is volunteer?
Yeah.
Send me a notice the next time. But that's all I have to say.
I
We
wish
do
they got
not
paid.
need any more residents, nor do we need any absentee landlords who don't give proper notice to people.
So you're solely duly noted. A lot of that can't be handled through this board. That's something for the town
Well,
council.
see, and then, so who do I go to now?
Town council. That's a meeting you have to attend and say exactly what you're saying to us. Because we don't
You
make
know
the
what I
rules.
have to say to the town council? That's why I can't wait to get the hell out of this town after 60-some years. Because they don't give a shit about the people. And we need another apartment building in Somerville like we need a hole in our head. And none of our property taxes have gone down. Because of all these apartments that all's gonna help us out. They're basically screwing us like the rest of the government. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions for the planner? Counselor?
Any other questions for the planner?
If there aren't any,
thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Dean.
so
Do
we,
you live there? Yeah, I
So-
don't think so.
Ma'am?
I guess, look, we've made the revisions on the fly here, to add the additional spaces. And, I know some people aren't satisfied with the 25 spaces, but, look, I'll just be blunt, I mean, you guys want to, are you ready to vote on it, up or down with 25, or do you need more information?
Board?
I'd like to see what, what the garage's extra building would look like and be, and what it actually, what the total is gonna, what the total thing's gonna look like, what the total thing is gonna provide, because I know what happens. And it's gonna get filled up with snow, and they're just gonna, it's gonna be Bell Avenue, Mid-All, Cayman, it's gonna be loaded, and it's loaded now. And that's what everybody's upset about. I think that's the biggest thing is, it all sounds great. Yeah, we don't want it vacant or have, I don't want some, may not agree with the next person that wants to come in and have a use. This is at least residential. So I think we would take that over some industrial, just because it's vacant doesn't mean it's gonna stay vacant forever.
Yeah, no, it's true.
So something's gonna happen. So we wanna try to, if something looks good, and nice residential helps, okay, let's try to make that work. But the biggest thing, it always say, oh, we only need this. It says we're only required this. Yes, but these people live here. So maybe the 1.2 isn't good enough for them. So, for me, even if it might meet a certain thing, I think we need to move that goalpost a little bit more so no one has to even think about when that happens, because it's going to. And we have to make sure that they're not gonna be charged for that parking space, because that's a big thing right there.
I just want to clarify, we're not moving the goalposts. I mean, the legal standards are what they are.
No, I don't mean to change the legality of it, but I mean, you see how everyone's upset because it always sounds like that's sufficient enough, and it never is. When they have a big snowstorm and there's 10 feet of snow, it happens, and they can't park. Or they charge an extra for the parking. All that has to be, we all kind of talked about it, but it's not written down like, this is what it's gonna look like, this is what's gonna include. Everything's been kind of like, oh yeah, maybe we'll do this and maybe we'll do that.
Just for the record, we're not gonna charge extra for the parking. I mean, when you get your rent, the rent or you sign your lease, it will include the parking.
Mr.
Clifford?
Yes, I did want to say, go ahead.
I was gonna ask you a question.
Sure.
Okay. I wanted to know if the parking will be in the resolution as a condition, the inclusive parking, that it won't be.
We can do that. We can put it in there.
Okay.
We can put it in there. I would suggest, if I may, we get, not just in Somerville, and so many towns these days with something like this, where there are changes on the fly. I would strongly recommend to the board that they have an opportunity to see what these changes look like in plans before you make a decision. It's just me, but I'm your attorney. My job is to keep you out of trouble, and that's what I'm aiming at. So, I mean, it would seem to me it would be advisable to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I think we'd be remiss in our volunteer duties. To not see revised plans of what the shed area will look like and not see.
And then the shed on the northern facade is basically unpainted block. So it begs the question, are any improvements from an aesthetic point of view proposed for the shed?
More
Which
important.
is 6,400 square feet.
The board's job here is to weigh and evaluate the evidence. You have to give them evidence to be able to evaluate, and I think that having plans, to me, makes a big difference. I mean, I've heard other comments made, certainly the comments made by Mr. Cole in connection with the shed are very pertinent. And it is something that, at least in my professional opinion, the applicant may want to consider those as well. But as far as making changes in your plans on the fly, we should see something in black and white. And that's my professional opinion and my advice to the board.
I agree.
That's fine, and I don't disagree with, look, if I can get away with not coming back, not that I don't mind coming here, but we get it. I mean, that's fine. We'll revise, give you, actually, we'll revise what we have, but it's really a set of plans for that building.
Correct.
We didn't propose that.
But I think, though, that you're gonna have to give testimony, because as I mentioned,
Oh, yeah,
there's
no.
a second floor.
Right.
You bring up the other side. I haven't even talked about the parking lot. There's a pile of dirt that's in the parking lot that seems to be
your building. There's
Correct.
brick that is piled up against the side of it. We should hear testimony with that. You have a beautiful plan. I think you can walk away tonight with the, not the assurance, but with the feeling that we like what you presented. Just do the 100% job. You did 90% of it. We need the 10% done.
That's fine. So we'll do that. I'm hoping, and from your volunteer perspective, you guys will all be volunteer here in January. So the board doesn't, because I gotta worry
I
about.
think the board's next regularly scheduled meeting will be January 17th.
Yeah, but that'll be your reorg.
Oh, yeah, well, I don't,
Art,
Art's up. Art's not here. He might be up.
Well, if he's not here, I don't know. So as long as I can see all your handsome faces in January. And the only reason I'm saying it is, I see you have a good report, I'll order, because you worry about enough eligible voters. That's what I'm driving.
Cliff, should we allow the public to have statements before the end of the evening, or wait for the conclusion of the?
it would be better for the public to make statements after they've had a chance to see the plans.
Okay.
The other thing that's important is, I don't have the roster in front of me. Madam Secretary should have it, but I believe everybody reappears in January, do they not? I know Mr. O'Neill is here till 2026, so.
I'm hard to get rid of.
And, you know, I believe Mr. Adair is in there, you know, most of you are coming back, so. I mean, is there anybody who will not be available here for the January meeting? I don't believe so.
I think we're all,
Cool.
I think we're all there.
All right, then we won't order, I won't order a transcript, because I just want to make sure we show up, we don't have 4 people because 3 have left or whatever, so I'll, if Mr. Gibbons and I think everybody will be back.
Can you be prepared by January, and Jenna, can I get on the agenda? That's what I wondered, yeah.
And we haven't published our 2024 dates beyond January. I don't think we'll be
And do they have to renotice?
Yeah, I would have to.
Yeah, that's really up to the board. They don't necessarily have to renotice.
Well, we don't know when it's gonna be, so.
Yeah, what do I carry it to? Well, here's what we could do. We could carry it to put us on the agenda for January 17th.
And it could be
understanding that
carried
we may
again.
not make it, and we can, if we're not gonna get hurt, I could just carry it from that point.
If it's not noticed, how does the public,
That's,
Yeah, you gotta give them a date
Yeah.
tonight.
that's what I'm saying.
yeah,
Otherwise, I will
And if
have
it did
to
not go
notice.
that night, it could be carried again on the public record to a subsequent meeting.
I think it's fair to say that this thing, from a scheduling point, of view, can't be heard until February or March. Continuation because of the other stuff that's already on the agenda.
so we should advise the public to check the website for the,
Well, you know what,
When
look,
it's this long, they typically renotice.
I'll just
That's what we've done
if it's
in
gonna be that long, I'll just renotice.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
I think that's wise,
No,
Mr. Salvaggi.
All right, so with that, we will get a set of plans. We'll get them to you as soon as we can, so you guys have a chance to mull it over, and God willing, we're here hopefully maybe in February.
Okay. I'm good.
Thank you, everybody here.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Is there any other things before the board this evening?
No, I had circulated circulated a letter in connection with the Bell Holdings case. Mr. Cushing is handling that, and apparently the judge has adjourned it again for a period of time. I'm getting a case going in Somerset County right now is a bit of a challenge. But, they're still trying to get Bell to do something. Not that I'm casting aspersion on them, but I think they're trying to get them to prepare some plans. But so far, that has not happened. At the most recent case management conference, they really didn't have anything. So at this point, the case continues to be in a holding pattern.
Okay.
And I'll keep you, of course, I'll keep you advised as soon as I hear anything.
Okay, nothing else before the board. Make a motion to adjourn?
Second?
All in favor? That's me.
Ed Allen, how are you? All my life. I grew up on Main Street, Fieldstone Drive.